Discussion of growth challenges facing Northern Greenville County.
Yep, it works, thank you.
T. Coker, Assistant Administrator for County Planning and Development, is joining us today. And I give you some details you want to provide for this discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we are very excited to have T. Cover from Greenville County joining us today. He's going to hopefully start the discussion with Planning Commission and with members of council and the members of the public as well. We're in the process, or we're just at the beginning of the comprehensive plan review, 5-year review that will be starting at the end of this year into early next year. So I asked T, and he graciously accepted to come out and talk to you all about some growth pressures that the county is seeing in the northern part of the county, and how that affects Travelers Rest, both good and bad. Just to get our heads wrapped around some of the issues. I don't want to take up too much time because he's a much smarter man than I am and a much better planner. So I'm going to turn it over to T to go ahead and kind of kick us off. But again, thanks for joining us.
T, if you could just talk a little, just very briefly about the comprehensive plan and the requirements of updating it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you
And
that.
we've been doing this for years.
That's right. Thank you so much. Yes, so in the state of South Carolina. Yes.
Should we suspend the rules? Normally, in a planning commission, city council is not to have a voice. Other than, should we suspend that rule to be a part of this discussion?
I don't know that we can suspend the rule.
Or could we amend it to be allowed to speak during this?
I think
When T's talking.
Mr. McCall, I think if you make it clear that you're speaking as a resident of the city of Travelers Rest, I think that would be
This, the
sufficient.
chair, did you find that?
I'm fine with that,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, yes.
Great. All right. Thanks. So in the state of South Carolina, all jurisdictions, cities, counties, towns are required by state law to adopt a comprehensive plan and basically to update that plan every 5 years and then start with a fresh planning process the subsequent decade. And so what a comprehensive plan does is it brings people together, it expresses a common vision for the future of a community, and it lays out a roadmap for success so that the jurisdiction can actively work towards realizing its vision. And so a good comprehensive plan is also a document that is used to underpin and inform all of the jurisdiction's land use and zoning regulations. And so many communities do, actually Greenville County is currently doing this, go through a comprehensive planning process, adopt said comprehensive plan, and rework land development regulations and zoning ordinances to reflect the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. And so if the community does a good job of this, it's kind of like a dance where the plan reflects the regulations and the regulations inform future plans. And so, as the goals and priorities of the community change over time, the ordinances, the regulations can then follow in the wake of those changes. Is this something that happens typically in practice? No. But that's the general idea behind the state enabling legislation and the intent for comprehensive plans. And a part of the enabling legislation, it also lays out the roles and responsibilities of local planning commissions, local boards of zoning appeal, boards of zoning appeal, I guess. And the relationship between elected officials and those appointed bodies. And so Greenville County has a comprehensive plan creatively titled Plan Greenville County. Mr. Foreman and I both worked on that project as consultants, so we had at least 2 meetings here in Travelers Rest at the high school in the gymnasium. And so the planning process for Plan Greenville County was tail end of 2018 and throughout the year of 2019. The plan was adopted in January of 2020 and has informed some big moves that the current county council has been able to make. For example, the establishment of the Historic and Natural Resources Trust, which sets aside county funding to basically provide gap financing for projects that are going to benefit the broader community in terms of acquiring natural resources or historic sites for public use. The best current example of that is the work that the trust is doing with Natural Land Trust, Upstate Forever, Bob Hughes, who owns some of the property, to acquire additional acreage for Paris Mountain State Park that would enable the park to have trails that wrap around the side of the mountain where they currently don't exist. So in theory, we could take the Swamp Rabbit, go through up to the backside of the golf course into the park and look back and see all of Traveler Trust. So it's that part of it. So the trust is an idea that was a part of that. Another big idea that the plan promoted was the consolidation or the unification of some of the special purpose districts, and in particular the sewer special purpose districts. And of course, Metropolitan Sewer District has consolidated, I believe it was 5 or 6 smaller sub-districts. So Taylor's, Wigginton, Kent, Korea, Slater, and let's see. But again, that was an idea that was born of the comprehensive plan. Another set of ideas is related to land development regulations. And so a good example would be agricultural preservation zoning. So that's a zoning district that exists in the county. It requires a 5-acre minimum lot size. It allows and encourages the types of land uses that are commensurate and compatible with working farm, with just the practical realities of being a property owner, with barns, with outbuildings, with animals, with those associated sounds and smells that come with it. And the idea for the ag zoning really is to give property owners in the far north and south the option to be able to zone themselves or zone an area in a way that matches the character of the place. And so the real big move or big outcome of the comprehensive plan is a project that the county has been working on for about a year. And we'll continue to work on for about another 9 months. And that's a complete rewrite of the county zoning ordinance and land development regulations. So this is planning commission meeting, so y'all know what all this is, but for the general public, land development regulations basically explain how to get something done. Okay, I have a piece of raw land, I want to do X on it. What are the basic requirements? The setbacks, what kind of utilities do I need? How high can I go? What materials can I use? And so on and so forth. But it's completely silent, it's agnostic as to the use or the intensity of those uses. That's where zoning comes into play. Zoning really answers the question, well, what and to what extent? So what is it? Is it a house? Is it a barn? Is it a factory? Is it a school? Zoning speaks to that. And then the intensity would be, is it a large lot subdivision? Are they quarter-acre lots? Are they townhomes? Are they apartments? Or is this a light manufacturing where everything is indoor? Or do we have smelters? We have cranes flying around the site? So that's what zoning does. And so if you'll go to the future land use map first. One of the, can you zoom out a little bit about this? Thank you. Great. So one of the deliverables, key deliverables of the comprehensive plan is something called a future land use map. And the future land use map is intended to guide future land use decisions for a jurisdiction. And in Greenville County, the future land use map for the area north of Travelers Rest is to remain primarily rural in character. And so anything that is dark green is going to represent protected lands. So there's Greenville watershed properties, DNR properties, state park properties. You can see at the bottom of the picture, you can see the outline of Harris Mountain State Park and other parks. The green that's not the kind of the medium green or not quite Kelly green. Those are areas that the future land use map suggests should retain a very kind of rural or agricultural character, where you have houses, but they're mostly large tracts of land. You have retail or commercial, but just enough to really service the community, the area that's in the green. And then you see the grayish areas, and that's where we anticipate a more of a rural character, but where you may have more services, more retail, where the lots are going to be somewhat smaller. And then into the yellow area is more kind of traditional, kind of low density suburban, and then the kind of the goal would be a higher density residential, with you can see maybe downtown Travelers Rest being more of a mixed use district in the downtown, and certainly along the key commercial thoroughfares, and that kind of that purplish is really what we call suburban mixed use, where you see multiple compatible land uses being in play, where single use zoning may or may not be a desirable thing. And honestly, it very closely, I think, resembles the downtown overlay you all have considered. And so again, this is the county's future land use map from the planned Greenville County Comprehensive Plan. If you go to the zoning map, it's important to understand the difference between the vision and the implementation of the vision. So again, we have the land development regulations. You don't need to do side by side. Just give me a full screen. Again, land development regulations essentially say, okay, what are the things we have to do to build a structure, to develop a piece of land? Zoning is about the specific use, the intensity, the density. Scroll out, just a little bit more, please. So you can see this is the zoning map for northern Greenville County. So a little bit more. Yeah. So other than a small area around Lake Ruhr and near the top of Caesar's Head, pretty much everything in northern Greenville County is unzoned. It's quiet. That means it's completely unzoned, which means that Greenville County is silent when it comes to the question, what can go here? What should go here? How much of X, Y, and Z is allowed here? What are the allowable densities? There's no zoning. Greenville County is silent.
They tried
Yes.
25 years ago.
25 years ago, and many times since then. And in fact,
I can't remember who the planning commission person was. But I will say, we sat in a meeting and almost got thrown out of the Greenville County Library because the planning commission was trying to do some zoning up here. And we had a community meeting at Sleep Inn Community Room at the time, and now got lynched.
So does that mean that
Yeah,
basically,
so things are changing that great, that's awesome, but it's yeah. I mean, it's progress, it's good.
well, yes, progress is good, but as you can see, we're still in the conversation stage with most of Northern Greenville County.
So it's a case-by-case decision on what the zoning will be for that particular.
No, there is no decision. You can have a smokehouse, gravel pit, daycare, subdivision, you know.
So there's no
factors.
say at all.
You can, as long as you can make it work, as long as you turn on the tap and water comes out, you flush the toilet and that goes somewhere else, and you have the adequate setbacks, you can literally build or do anything.
So is the goal of Greenville County to move towards zoning areas or a case-by-case basis by comments of what they would want to use that
That's-
property for?
That's a great question. So, you know, as the chair alluded to, you know, the politics of zoning in Northern Greenville County have always been contentious. I will say, just 2 weeks ago, I was invited to Gallinsville Community Center, which Gallinsville is just below Lake Ford. And, you know, it's funny when you go there, like their center of gravity, it's not Greenville, it's not Greer, it's when they talk about the city, they're talking about Tryon or Campbell. So
This will be Lake Lanier,
Like on there.
not
Right.
Lake.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep saying Lake Lure. I meant to say Lake Lanier.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. And so that's kind of an interesting dynamic, but, you know, they're up there and they, well, we want to, we want to protect, we want to preserve what we have, our quality of life is rural, et cetera, what can we do? So we're at the initial stages of a conversation about zoning. But there are a host of other tools that could work depending on the priorities of that community, but it's consistently been the position of county council, and in particular, this is all District 17 of we've had the same county councilor for 20 some odd years, and it's been, and he probably will not be the county councilor for this district in January, but he's basically said, well, if people want it, I'm happy to help, but if they don't, I'm not going to. And so that's basically what you're looking at. That map is a combination of, you know, it's not a snapshot of current state of mind, however, but what you're looking at is 25 years of resistance and, you know, unwillingness to kind of pull people along. So if you can go to the subdivision now, I'll show you, I'll just give you a flavor, and this is a snapshot. This is control L. This reflects major and minor subdivisions that have been approved in the northern part of Greenville County, excluding the cities of Greer and Greenville.
What is the definition of major and minor?
That's right. So a minor subdivision is 2 to 6 lots. A major subdivision is 7 lots from the line. And it's kind of hard to read, and I'll make sure Mike shares this with everyone afterwards, but the red dots are the minors, again, so 6 or fewer lots. Thank you. So the blue triangles include the number of lots. And so it's important to note that these are just subdivisions that have been approved. These aren't necessarily subdivisions that have been developed, although some of them have. And this reflects just an 18-month time frame from January 2021 to July 2022. So you can see that 888 lots essentially have been blessed by the county planning commission for this neck of the woods. We'll say last month alone, the planning commission approved 858 new lots.
What do they deem a lot, what size?
Varies, I'm
What
sure.
size? If it's a townhome, it's, 1,100 square feet. We've got zoning for, it goes up to RR3, which is a 3-acre lot and minimum. But then, there was an equestrian, community that was approved, that had like 5, 6, 7, 8-acre lots. So it varies, but, most of the subdivision approvals, the growth that we're seeing is in the southern part of the county. In the Malden, Simpsonville areas, along 25 or, the southern connector. Because, and then in the Piedmont area, you have, it's unzoned, just like Northern Greenville County. But unlike Northern Greenville County, REWA has a presence, and so having public sewer enables developers to have much smaller lots. And so in the unzoned parts of the county, if you're an unzoned area and you want to have your developer say, and you want to have a major subdivision, and you're required to pull together a preliminary plat application, much like I'm sure you see, and present it to the planning commission for approval. In the unzoned part of the county, all of our subdivisions are required to fall under Article 22, the Land Development Regulations, which is entitled Rural Conservation Subdivision. I worked on the original ordinance. It was significantly watered down once it made its way through the legislative process. And so the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. So that's about 7 units per acre. But there are buffers and open space requirements that lead to a lower overall density. But if you're in the unzoned part of the county and you have access to public water and sewer, you can have a pretty dense suburban style neighborhood. If that's something that you want. The reason why, if you could hand back out, one of the reasons why the map was different, well, you don't have the point of comparison visually, but hopefully I sketched a mental image. You would see a lot more blue triangles if we look at the southern part of it. But the reason why, especially north of Travelers Rest, we don't see too many of these blue triangles. It goes back to the availability of public sewer, of users. So, as long as public water, and especially public sewer, aren't available, I expect you're going to see interest and appetite for certain types of downtracking. Depending.
Tremendous amount of buffer and protection for those scenarios.
Absolutely.
You can only do so much in the terrain north of here.
That's right.
So you're not going to lay out a tract Mungo home thing. I mean, I'm just saying, and those type terrains, you just doesn't allow for it.
That's right. And especially, once you get north of 11, yeah,
Right.
Other than the cliffs is up there.
You're right. And that's very
But
specific.
yeah, you're not going to see that. So I think the new development as it pertains to Travelers Rest, we are seeing a lot of interest in properties along near the Swamp Rabbit Trail. So for you all, that would be that areas that sort of surround the Furman side of the city limits. I can think of a couple of subdivisions that are really contiguous to the city, or they just 1 or 2 parcels away, maybe.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Some of the subdivisions that are in the county, are they contiguous? The ones along the trail, like Bella?
Oh, yeah, Bello is contiguous, and then the townhouse one, I believe, is at one point a portion of the site.
So, so I anticipate you're going to see more development along the Swamp Rabbit Trail. And then, of course, as you get more rooftops, then you're likely to see, some additional commercial development follow. Hopefully downtown and 25 here in the city will be able to absorb most of that demand. But I really appreciate you bringing up that point, the topography, really, yeah, it does provide some protection.
Orders and question and has a long Tryon. And the Landrum Tryon downtown areas are doing what we're trying to do. The renovations of those downtown areas, and the people around those areas are basically on that same page. And those are fairly closely joined. The rural farms in between there, have the zoning already in place for them with the acreage and those type of things. So it is that northern part along the mountains that we're looking at primarily. Is that correct? Because it is like everything north of 11. It's not, but primarily that whole area.
I think
You
too,
guys own
the PG pipeline is going in along 290. I think, now that Rewa's taken over the sewer system in Tigerville, there's been discussion about kind of bridging over this way. So I think there are probably some corridors that are near Travelers Rest where, the next decade or so we might see some more.
And the new Dollar General at North Granville University.
For what it is?
Dollar General. Absolutely. And so, I guess my message for you all is, Greenville County is growing. It's still growing. The 7% interest rates putting a damper on new home purchases. I know that some of the national builders, they're getting nervous, and that's fine. And, it's a cyclical industry, but as long as Greenville County remains the center of economic and cultural life,
Be a
Which I think-
big announcement.
with the battery,
With the battery and the EV production.
which, let's face it, I think that's what we want. We want to be a place that's thriving, and so as long as that's the case, and people can afford to live here and folks can raise their families here.
And we have a plan for it.
That's right. And that's right. And people can sell their homes elsewhere. Then we're going to continue to grow. And so, the county's comprehensive plan really is an answer to the question of how do we accommodate future growth.
Is there in that their application for roads, new roads?
I'm glad you bring that up. So, and this is just me, not as, this is me as a Greenville County resident, not as a county employee. I feel like there's so many things our community does well. It's the healthcare system, it's the education system. We have 6 amazing downtowns in our cities. There's great quality of life and so many assets and amenities. But so that the things where we fall short are just that much more evident, not clear.
Well, in the 25 years ago, that I referred to, part of that discussion was a bypass around the
I can see why they would
Yeah.
have been upset about that.
And I was born and raised in Greenville when I was 61. And I can guarantee you, there's not many roads I go down today that I haven't been going down since I was 5. There's not many new ones. There's just not many new ones.
Hey, since you were
And a lot of them are probably the same potholes.
So here's where we are with roads. So currently, Greenville County owns and we try to maintain about 1,900 miles of roads. We add roughly 30 miles of roads a year to the network. We have, hopefully we'll have more, but we've had over the recent years about $8 to $9 million for road maintenance for repaving. That gives us about anywhere from 25 to 30 miles. So we're adding 30 miles, we're able to maintain just about that many miles
And that's Greenville County as a whole.
as a whole. And now, as county roads are subdivision, neighborhood roads. They're the start of everyone's school, unless you live in the city. And they're also some of the old farm market roads and the rural parts of the county. So there's nothing fancy about most county roads. But the fact is, the county has done so little for so long to maintain the existing roadway infrastructure. Like, we're on basically 120-year paving cycle, which is just absurd.
Right.
So it's, at some point, there will be a reckoning. At the same time, Greenville County has roughly 1,800 miles of DOT roads. And now, those are, the actual length of the roads is not as long, because those are, how do you do today, next month? Basically take that number and divide by 2. So roughly, almost 900 miles of roads altogether. DOT's budget, like the gas tax money, the federal or the state gas tax, that pays for repaving and for safety improvements primarily. There is no pot of money for road widenings. The money directed for that is called guide share, and it flows through GPAS, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the urbanized part of the county. And then for APOD, the Appalachian Tribal Council of Governments, for the rural parts of the county. And so any money that's available for widenings or improvements that go beyond just intersection treatments and repavings, it comes from that pot. And it's just not enough.
And I think you'd be amazed if you looked and really looked at the square mileage of Greenville County. It's tremendous, a huge county.
695 square miles.
Yeah. And it's huge.
It's huge, and so where we are again with roads is we have a huge county inventory of neighborhood roads, and we're so far behind. We've neglected to maintain those for many years. We're not even keeping up with what's being added to the inventory. The state inventory is in a state of disrepair, and so what all of our peer counties, Gordon, Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester, York, Richland, they've all moved forward basically with some form of a self-imposed tax, whether
Hospitality tax, that
no, like a sale, like they call it a penny tax. So there's a transportation penny, there's a capital penny. The transportation penny, you can do just a half penny sales tax. But if you ever, if you go down to the coast and you enjoy a nice, freshly designed, paved 4-lane road, that's because, when you went out to eat or went to do whatever, you were paying for it. So Greenville County is kind of on the outside looking in. So at some point, something's got to give. At some point, we're going to have to figure out how to, if we want something nice, we've got to pay for it. And so either we won't pay for it, and there's no end in sight, and I've teased my colleague that instead of repaving, maybe she should just get some black paint and just we can paint more roads than we can repave.
But and that going back down to what we're talking about in general is the concentration and the growth and everything else. And it all goes back down to that, the infrastructure and the roads. And, because if all of this is coming in around us, TR, and this is the main thoroughfare for all of this to come through, we're kind of.
Yeah, I mean, take 276.
That's what I
once you
mean.
get to Slater, Marietta, it's a nightmare. So, you know, again, I feel like this community, we do so many things so well. I mean, we've got a tremendous school district. They're on top of things. I can't share some of the contents, but I'll say that they are very prepared to have new schools in the southern part of the county, to meet the population growth. They're on top of things. And thank God, the ER is, the hospital is going to be here. Again, we do so many things well, but I think that the roads in particular is where we fall short. Now, given that we have consolidation, metropolitan sewer district, they've got some growing up to do. But I know that, you know, a lot of the older sub-districts in Korea, you know, Taylor's, they were financed originally with Clean Water Act dollars in the early 70s. They were also fire districts, and it was a lot more fun to take care of fire trucks and, you know, be a fire chief than it was to be in charge of the sewer district. So you have a lot of aging infrastructure, but Metro has a plan to reinvest in some of those aging systems. And you know, when you go down White Horse Road or some of the other kind of busted up older commercial thoroughfares, one of the reasons why you haven't seen redevelopment or reinvestment is because the sewer is at capacity. And if, let's just say you want to put a car wash on White Horse Road, you better be prepared to pay several $100,000 to have a new sewer line installed to go down to a rewash on top of also development. So over time, this is what the plan recommends, and I hope this comes true. A lot of those places like the White Horse Roads and the southern part of Augusta Road and Wade Hampton, even Orange Road is in the process of transforming. Poinsett Highway. You know, I hope that a lot of those existing commercial thoroughfares will be able to be the receiving grounds for new commercial development. That's my hope. But it is, you know, the consolidation is the first and critical piece to that. So we'll see what the path will lead us. So, you know, all in all, I think there's reason to be optimistic. There's a lot of cause for concern. But I don't think our problems we don't have bad problems. You know, we're not Youngstown, Ohio. You know, we're not a place where the kids grow up and you're like, sweetheart, you gotta leave, never come back. Like, I love you so much, you never come home. So, you know, we have really problems. And really the problems we have are just, and I would much rather have our problems than Portland County or Lee County or Union County's problems. Give us our problems. So so I think there's a path forward, but we're not on the right track with everything. And so I think from where I sit, my purview is planning codes and sort of larger county. From my little perspective, we really need to figure out how to fund, not new infrastructure necessarily, but our existing infrastructure and figure out how to make the most of what we currently have. While at the same time make sure that new development that comes online is of a level of quality that reflects really our status as a community, right? Because we're not Greenville County, Travelers, we're not beggars, you know, we're not paupers, we're not agreeing to build a subdivision here. I mean, people are knocking down the door just getting here. So it would, in my opinion, it would be foolish not to use that as leverage to ensure not to, you know, if you go to like Arlington, Virginia, it's almost like a shakedown. You walk in and someone like dear mine is like, what are you gonna do for us? You know, we really need a school. we say. You know, like, script check and we'll talk, kind of thing, like, and I don't think, we don't want to do that, I don't think anyone wants us to do that, but we can ask for, we can demand better, and, because preserving quality of life, ultimately, that's why we're all here, whether we're elected officials, appointed, or staff, our job is to ensure high quality of life. So, with that, I'm gonna be quiet and just, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
I just have a comment. I want to thank T for coming and speaking to y'all tonight. What I see when I look at this map, it does cause me concern, just because if you notice the primary thoroughfares that everybody's going to be traveling on come right to the heart of our city, 276 and 25. And as growth continues to go unbridled without any growth management north of us, it's going to tremendously impact traffic congestion in our city. And there's no amount of blacktop that can fix that. So you can repave the roads, but we're looking at narrowing 276 in the downtown. We're not looking at widening it. So when you talk about moving vehicles, traffic generation is where my interest lies, is specifically in to do some more detailed planning about projections with everybody moving here from California and all over the nation. What are those updated growth projections look like? And what are those impacts that we can anticipate? And what does that build out look like over a period of time, so we can, at least we will see what's coming at us before it hits us. There might not be a lot that we can do about it, because we can't make decisions about what happens in the county, but this is a team sport. And that's why we wanted to get T here tonight, because we have to work collaboratively with the county in order to establish some growth management tools around our jurisdiction that can help us. Right now, there's been a tremendous amount of infrastructure added to support North Greenville University, and there's been sewer added to that area. And so you're going to see the growth follow that sewer. There's a basin that was just north of our city that's just been opened up by sewer service. We're going to see growth follow that, and we'll see growth whether there's sewer or not. It's just going to be larger lot growth. And so I think what we need to really be looking at is how in the world are we going to plan effectively and make decisions. We make decisions just within our 4.6 square mile area. But if somebody builds an apartment complex right on our doorstep, it still is going to have a tremendous impact on us. And so the state does allow for extra jurisdictional planning. And I'd like for maybe T just to kind of give a brief. We would love to work with the county on some extra jurisdictional planning to get some plan, because before T was in this position, I was in his position. So I know exactly where he's coming from, but we do have an opportunity to get some extra jurisdictional planning and growth controls within that area outside our city limits, and that would be a step in the right direction, I feel.
Can I add to what Eric said, and just ask you your opinion?
Sure.
Eric, everything he said is spot on. There's one thing that we lack in this end of the county that they have in the middle part of the county and in the southern part of the county. And that is, we haven't been affected by the Mark IIIs. We haven't been affected by the 4-star. We haven't been affected by Polky. The developers that are here are basically small-time developers. Whereas there, in the lower part of the county, you've got Mark III on every corner. You've got 4-star, you've got Portland going crazy all over the southern part of the county. You understand what I'm asking you? Is that kind of piggyback on what he's saying? I mean, the lack of those huge developers here, that makes a difference.
It makes a difference, but I'll say this, I would encourage you not to let that lull you into complacency. I mean, for Mark III or a 4-star, I mean, they're gonna be looking for 100 acres plus.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And, they don't need flat, but they need greenfield flat.
Yeah.
Where you can flatten, where you can create
And they want the sewer,
Because
they
they
want
want
the sewer.
sewer, and the construction method, we know, they don't do, pier foundations, everything is slab on grade, so they literally will level out everything. And so, now when, in the southern part of the county, especially the unzoned parts, like around Piedmont, it's, it's really crazy.
Those two in particular are everywhere.
They're everywhere. Again, so you've been, for a variety of reasons, you've been insulated from that. Again, I think the lack of sewer, today, which is changing, and then the fact that we don't even have like Greenville flat, here, that's made it less appealing and appetizing.
To the mega development.
Well, one of the
But
things
but that's right now.
Yeah.
So,
Right now, that's
we'll
right.
see.
we have one in our favor, and I'm just speaking strictly for Travelers Rest, is Furman, Harris Mountain, and the mountains. I mean, we have some buffer because of those things around us that's limiting those types of mass destructions. And luckily, because of that, I mean, it's limited to what they can do. That's why we have small builders up here. We have
So you mentioned, that the county, Boone County Schools has a plan in the southern part of the county for replacing schools, building schools based on that. And when I look at the red dots and the triangles up there, and Eric, do we need to be having those conversations with the school district to have a plan for our schools here? Because we're very limited on schools.
I think it would be great. I mean, we're buddies with Skids at Lindbaker. It might be good to bring Skid
And
Bob.
we have one middle school, we have one high school, and we're fed by 4 or 5 elementary schools.
I'm sure they would be more than happy to.
And they're pretty much at capacity. I'm not concerned about the next 5 or 6 years, but 20 years, I am concerned. And we know what we went through to get a new high school. And we did. And it was pulling teeth, shaming. I mean, it wasn't a fun process from a community standpoint, to do that. That was before I was ever even on council, right?
Yeah, but
You know,
you and me and Duncan Shirley and everybody hollering and screaming right here, I mean.
it wasn't fun. So if we can have some conversations
Right.
and at least know there's a thought process that we need to be looking at over in Clark County. Because it's not, we're past, I think we're beyond thinking that everybody moving here is moving here after they retire. That's not the case.
Right.
How many people come to Furman and stay?
Yeah.
And they want to stay right here. So I think it would just behoove us to have some conversations ahead at this point, at least preliminary with the school district to talk about that.
And that's a great question, because right now there's a plan, but the school district is flying blind where there's no zoning, because they cannot adequately predict the number of lots. Zoning gives you predictability.
Right.
And so if we ask them to come and plan, they're gonna say, well, bring T up here, talk to T, because we don't know how many lots to plan for. So you have to start with something that's predictable, and zoning gives you that ability to plan. Whereas we see white, there is no ability to plan. You're basically at the mercy of infrastructure providers, which in this case it would be sewer and water, are going to really dictate the amount, and they have a first come, first served policy. So the first developer in the door, he can get 20 units per acre in the white area. And, there's no ability to really plan around that. I mean, it's very difficult to anticipate, it's not evenly distributed growth. It's, I got sewer in this little area, and somebody finds out, they go in there and they do an apartment complex. And that could happen very rapidly.
I am gracious to see that the county is looking towards zoning. I'm sure there's still some out there that don't think it's necessary, but There's a reason that 40 years ago, people chose to live in the city limits versus a mile outside the city limits. That's why I grew up in Providence. My parents wanted to be in the city where they knew their neighbors were not going to devalue their property. And such. And there are still people who do that, but.
And you had a school, you had a hospital, you had.
No, we didn't have a hospital.
Well.
So I'm pleased to see that there's some conversations going on.
Well, and you,
Case in point, was Fountain Inn.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, when they first started talking about Fountain Inn or the high school, I know, I was there then, that was 4 or 6 years ago when they first started talking about it, and how long did it take them to build it? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, it's,
There's been one huge fundamental change that helped slow growth down and make it come at a more natural pace prior to COVID, and that was the amount of jobs available. Right now, we have people moving here and their job may be in another state. And so our current growth is changed, our dynamic is completely changed. So growth is not inhibited right now by the amount of jobs that are available in our community. Their jobs could be anywhere in the United States, and they're moving here taking advantage of our lower cost of living.
And quality of life.
And quality of life.
everything home.
And so that's a fundamental change that used to kind of help us grow at a more natural pace, because you could pretty much anticipate the growth by the amount of jobs, and you're like, wow, where are all these people coming from and why are they living here? But right now, they're
And
taking.
they're not retired.
Yeah, well, they're taking advantage, yeah, they're not retired and they're working from home and their job may be in California and they're getting paid California wages.
That's the major fundamental issue that my profession is dealing with now, is how to account for communities that grow without the job growth, without the nearby job growth. So T can move to California or from California here and continue his job online, enjoy the low cost of living, enjoy the quality of life, and basically
It's
bring,
like what we named the low taxes.
low as compared to California or New York, sure. And you're seeing that not on a small scale, but you're seeing that on a grand scale, especially now with COVID, especially the last few years. That's completely upended the majority of the modeling that we have available to us to give us a good idea of how growth is going to occur. Greenville this area is the sweet spot, and T and I, when we put together the numbers for the Greenville County Comp Plan even 3 years ago, we were at 550,000 for the county roughly, adding potentially another 220,000, if I remember correctly, over the next 20 years. We might have undershot that, and I felt like at the time we were being conservative. I think we really undershot that.
There's that many people downtown Greenville.
It's a lot. So people are coming. We're the sweet spot. We're warm enough here in the south. We're in the south. We've got the beautiful mountains right next door, close enough to the beach.
3 hours from the beach.
So we're in a spot that everybody wants to be. People complain. I grew up in Florida. I know a lot of people that are thinking of moving up here because they're sick of Florida. It's too hot, too crowded. So they're gonna make it too crowded here. So people from the north obviously come down just to get away from the weather, get away from high taxes. So we're sort of in we're in a very sweet spot. We're in a sweet spot, and like T mentioned, it's a good problem to have. It is a good problem to have, but I don't want to live in Youngstown, Ohio. I'm happy to deal with growth issues rather than the negative growth issues.
Well, I appreciate some coming in and at least bringing this to attention and taking that opportunity. So.
I'm curious to know, is the zoning reluctance more of a political reluctance over the past 20 years, or is
I think
is there a real pushback?
Generational.
I think we'll know a lot more.
Yeah.
And the way that this part of the county, I should have brought this map, Eric, you might have it, you might have it too, but Greenville County was 7 different areas. So basically take a square mile or more. So that's, so areas and was the practice. And then at some point in the 2000s, we kind of got away from that, and it became more of like citizen-led. And so a lot of this in the southern part of the county is like large lot residential. So I'm hoping that we'll see what happens with the election, but I've spoken to at least one of the candidates about revisiting areas of need. So, personally, let's just take a look at it, city limits, from like 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. If we're able to look at some areas and at least on the edge of the city, I think that would bring some predictability.
And the reason I say generational is because I was knew about this 25, 26 years ago, when they were talking about zoning, they were talking about this bypass. It's mind-blowing. You can't tell me what to do with it. You're not gonna tell my kids, I did this for my kids. I want them to be able to do what they want, take this land for them. And now, what's happened is kids have inherited this land and they're selling it.
And they're selling it to
They don't have
developers.
it.
Now they're
So-
selling it to creating the very problem that
Yeah,
we're
so
trying to
that's
avoid.
kind of why I say generational. I think it is, it's very different than it was.
It is.
but-
So,
And so the zoning changes come about by community meetings and, political influences and,
it's a legislative process, and it's spelled out in state law and by the city. And it requires 3 readings of county council. It also requires planning commission to weigh in. Then there's a committee, planning development committee, but to initiate, well, actually that's Teresa. To initiate zoning, it looks a little different, but it's still generally the same. It's a legislative process.
But I think in Greenville County's comprehensive plan and our comprehensive plan seem to interconnect north of here.
I think that's a fair statement. The issue is that while our plans interconnect, our regulations do not. Because if you ask me for a build out scenario, I just feel like,
Where's the sewer?
yeah,
That
that
is
is
the piece.
literally it.
I think a common sense solution that I would advocate for, and I've talked with T about in the past, is as sewer, say Rewa, expands their area for service, it needs to come in concert with that area being zoned. So in other words, they would not expand their service into an area without zoning, but they would have to zone it simultaneously. So you don't have a disconnect between supporting higher density without the zoning to complement that, yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear a conversation about, the term you used, having zoning outside of our city limits, or is that what you said?
Yeah, the extra jurisdictional planning, yes. It gives cities the ability to plan for up to a mile radius outside their city boundaries. And so we initiated some conversations Mike has, and actually with our agreement with Metropolitan Sewer, we have really implemented a portion of the area that if Metro extends their district into a portion just outside our city and they provide service collection in that area, people would have to sign an annexation covenant with the city if they're not contiguous. And so really that serves 2 purposes. If they're contiguous to the city and they want to do something that doesn't meet the county's plan, all we want to do is have a tool to enforce what the county has already planned for that to be, which is more rural residential. Then we would basically be able to annex that person and implement the plan that was adopted by the county council, or a plan that we adopt for that area as far as extra jurisdictional planning. But right now, so we'll be going through that process on the extra jurisdictional planning of that area, and then starting to have some conversations with the county and with some of the infrastructure providers to see if they can assist us with that implementation.
And to Eric's point, if with Greenville, City of Greenville, Greenville Water, with Greer and CPW, a lot of cities, they essentially have a hook when it comes to annexation. So if you build a subdivision that's contiguous to the city of Greenville, you say, well, it would be great if the water came out of your faucet. When you turn it on, oh, you want water?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you need to come in. So, and in 3 years, CPW have a similar arrangement. Oh, you want to have some TV? So it's good to know that there's a similar agreement with Metro. And, you know, years ago, I remember having a conversation with Diana about Green Valley. And it was like, wouldn't it be cool if they were willing to come to the city? I mean, you would have like awesome new board members and commissioners.
Few more
and-
people have to come. I'm serious.
But I remember
There's been
we-
big pushes for that.
this is years ago.
They
We
can't
looked-
they can't get enough people.
we even looked at some numbers and it was like, okay, well, so you dial 911, or you look at your homeowner's insurance, or, you know, I live in the county and on my street, there's 5 different trash service providers, which guarantees that every single day of the week, you got a giant truck clanging down the street at 5 in the morning, you know, and like,
Helping
You
the
don't-
roads also, that.
yeah, and like, those are just things you don't think about, and so,
It's
I mean-
probably been, I don't know, 12 years, 10, 12 years since we had any conversation with Green Valley. And it just, I mean, we're closer, every time we've had a conversation, we're closer. But honestly, there's just,
A lot of reasons.
there's just a handful of resistance that have a lot of power. They'll have it. And now, I mean, the majority of people live there, say they wouldn't drive around.
and so, you know, I would encourage you, you know,
Mhm.
to use annexation to your advantage when and where it makes sense, because, I mean, from my position, whether you're in a city or you're not, you're still in Greenville County. You know? Like, but I want the city of Travelers Rest to be able to, I want you to be able to execute the vision that you have for your community, and, you know, if you, just like with Greenville County, you lack zoning, you know, if it's just in an unincorporated county, it doesn't really matter what the city of Travelers Rest thinks, you just get what you get.
Right.
And so, and I'm not saying annexation is the solution to everything. Yours annexed, you know, everything, and now they have trouble with, you know, responding to emergency service calls and that sort of thing. So,
Well, and that's the one thing we've known, those of us that have been involved in community development for a long time, is although we're small in square mileage, north of here, and further north, everything that happens affects the city of Travis. It's where our high school is, it's the community, it's the center of the community, and it affects us strongly. And although our responsibilities to our residents here, part of that responsibility is considering what happens outside us and how it affects us, and how we affect what is outside of us.
And looking at the whole picture.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that. They just don't think that through, but it's.
We were at Eagle Mountain Winery the other week, and I looked at the back of the bottle, and their address is at Travelers Rest.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know where that is, on Highway 11? Travelers Rest. I was like, well, what? They're not Travelers Rest. Yeah, they do.
So,
That's how
well,
far.
yeah.
It's
So-
crazy.
Any other questions or comments? While here, we're on the rabbit trails, but, we're being respectful of everyone's time.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to button up the conversation if I could. Yeah, the main purpose of getting the tea here today was to have these conversations, to get the conversation started, just to get y'all to see, since the comprehensive plan that we will be working on this next year is an expression of the planning commission's desire for orderly growth in TR. It's a good place to start because we do need to realize that we are planning for responsible growth here in Travelers Rest, but there's other players involved, and I think that was sort of the main crux of the conversation tonight, is that we can plan for what we need to plan for, but we need to understand there's other players that are being the table. So I really appreciate the team coming out, and appreciate everybody else that came out as well, to have that conversation. And just keep in mind, we'll be having a few more of these as we move through the next few months.
Besides
It's
some of
great
these-
having T, who's been involved with Travel Trust.
It's
Several
some of his
capacities.
faults that we're.
Several capacities, you know, that he's a friend,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
so it's great to come on here, so thank you for the invitation.
Anything else, Commissioner Keith? If not, I would, your motion to adjourn? Motion. Second? All in favor? Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, public.
For being here.
Our public. Thank you for seeing.
It's across.
We just